3, 2, 1. Downtown. Okay, what's wrong with me? Two things. One, I have a microphone here. What am I using this for? And two, well, I can't sing like Anya Taylor-Joy. No way. I'm just gonna leave it to her, and we'll get into the review. What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and today we're getting into my spoiler-free thoughts for Last Night in Soho. A huge thank you to Focus Features for giving me the chance to watch this in a Dolby theater because it makes all the difference. This film is big on music and big on sound, so it's only fitting that I got the chance to see it in person. It's directed by Edgar Wright, and it's starring Thomasin McKenzie, Anya Taylor-Joy, Matt Smith, and even Diana Rigg. Yes, Lady Olenna Tyrell herself, you guys. But like I said, this is a spoiler-free review because there are a lot of details here where you're going to want to go in cold. But let's get into the story a little bit if you are unfamiliar. This movie is really about an aspiring fashion designer named Eloise who is mysteriously able to enter the 1960s where she encounters a dazzling wannabe singer. And let's just say all that glamour, all that glitz that she thought she was going to be able to experience, well, it ain't all gold, and trust me, things get very weird. Now, before we get into what I thought really worked about this movie and what I thought didn't work too well, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where we talk about movies like this all the time, so you're not going to want to miss out. Go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit that thumbs up button, you guys, if you are a fan of Edgar Wright. And you know what? Hey, what the heck? Get loud down below in the comments and let me know which Edgar Wright film is your favorite. And yes, it's okay to choose Last Night in Soho if you see it this weekend as well. Alrighty, you guys, so enough of talking about what the movie is. Let's talk about what the movie does really well. And it really starts with the man at the top, which is Edgar Wright. This is his most layered film. Now, I understand there are going to be a lot of people who come into this not expecting to really pay attention to every little detail, but you're going to want to do that. And also, you're going to want to just stick around for the twist. There's something so cool that this movie builds to, and I think it does a really good job along the way. But I also love the fact that I came into this cold. I didn't see any trailers. I saw the posters and some first look images, but that doesn't tell you anything. What honestly I am so glad I didn't do is sit down and watch all three trailers. I think there were 3, because there are some things about this plot that work better when you just don't know what the heck is coming next. But outside of the source material itself, I think there's an incredible amount of style that Edgar Wright brings to this, and if you know Edgar Wright, you know that this is a Edgar Wright film through and through. I mean, there's just amazing bits of familiar elements he plays with, like things from a thriller movie or a horror movie, but it doesn't necessarily start that way. So what I love is that we just get that ramped up as the movie goes on, and he just adds his signature touch to the film. There are awesome reds and blues that he plays with here, some unique angles, framing, and just horrific sequences that were really creepier due to the editing. So it's all just a recipe for success when you think of what Edgar Wright did with Last Night in Soho. And I love that he was able to bring along some people that he's worked with in the past as well, like composer Stephen Price, who did work on Baby Driver with Edgar Wright, and then he also worked on Attack the Block and Gravity. So the man knows his way around some very epic and big sounds. And that, coupled with an amazing soundtrack, just adds a lot of authenticity to the 60s themes it plays with in London. And then, guys, Last Night in Soho gets to a point where it's just sensory overload, but in the best way possible. The first stabbing sequence is just insanely well shot. Then you have flashing lights when Sandy is in Soho, so everything is kind of just very hectic, but man, it just worked for me. And a great deal of praise needs to be given to the cinematographer who worked on this film, Chung Hoon Chung. He worked on It Part 1, but man, this is probably his best work that I've seen yet. The guy just understands his way not only around a camera, but how to really bring the best out of a given scene. It could look plain as day, but it's just the way he shoots certain sequences that just have my jaw on the ground. And as an Edgar Wright fan, I expected the writing to be snappy, and it was here. It was tight, and no line of dialogue went wasted. And I was also never bored with the movie at all. I was really intrigued to see what would come next, and I kept asking myself that question and trying to predict what might happen by the end. I mean, I was wrong, but it was still fun. And again, I do love how the movie doesn't start off as a horror movie, and instead, when it does get closer to the end, we get into that territory, but also a psychological thriller, which the movie really is at its core. There is this eerie bit of atmosphere being played with, though, in the beginning when we first get introduced to Eloise, and then as we get into London, and then of course the 60s with Sandy, things start to get a little creepier just as we take every single step forward. So the movie's always playing with that underneath the surface, and I thought it was just excellent. So we got amazing horror vibes, awesome directing, some beautiful cinematography, and really tight writing. But what's next, guys? it really starts with the acting here by Thomasin McKenzie. This is Thomasin McKenzie's best performance to date. It is her breakout role. I loved her in Jojo Rabbit, but she is just excellent here in Last Night in Soho. And guys, I know a lot of people will come into this saying, man, she's amazing. I never knew she was even a thing in Hollywood, and this is going to be that film that puts her on the radar for so many people. As the old saying goes, if you don't know, now you know. But she really delivers as Ellie, a character dealing with past trauma, mental health issues stemming from her family, and trying to fit in as a countryside girl living in London studying fashion design. But it isn't just about Thomasin McKenzie here, because when she does run into Sandy, the dream girl, the 60s kind of London chic singer who wants to be big, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, this is when the film gets smart and tries to draw a lot of parallels between both characters. Sandy's trying to become a famous singer and fit in during this period of time where, well, there's a lot of famous singers. And then you have Ellie, who in some regards is the same way. She's trying to be a fashion designer in the big wide world of, well, London. But outside of just the character beats, you guys, I thought that Anya Taylor-Joy delivered one of her best performances to date as well. I loved her in The Queen's Gambit, but here there's something special that she does with Sandy, the character of Sandy, that she has just not done before in movies. She's able to convey lots of terror through her eyes, a mysterious vibe, but there are a lot of unsettling moments that are made that much more unsettling because of Anya Taylor-Joy's performance. And then I love what she did next to Thomasin McKenzie as well. There are moments where both characters, I don't want to say too much, but let's just say they play off of one another, and boy, does it work. But outside of our two leads, I really thought our supporting cast was strong here, and that includes Matt Smith as Jack, Sandy's manager and sadly the man who ruins her life. He's convincing, conniving, and incredibly sinister, because even from those images I've seen, I never really trusted him, but in this film, I was floored by some of his actions, for better and for worse, but I will say it's mainly for worse. The man is just great at what he does with this character, but he's not supposed to be likable. So if you come out of this saying I hated Jack, well, he did his job. And then there's the legendary Diana Rigg, who plays Miss Collins, the landlord at Eloise's new apartment. Because Eloise doesn't always start off here at this apartment, she's sharing her flat with Jocasta and some of these mean girls, and we'll get into that later. But Diana Rigg is the landlord at this new apartment complex that, well, let's just say it has a lot more underneath the surface than we once thought. It's in these moments where we get a lot of these dream sequences with Thomasin McKenzie, and I do love the fact that there is a connection that she's trying to make with this room. And then there's always that overbearing bit of suspense and mystery that Diana Rigg is able to bring as Miss Collins. So I love the fact that no matter what, as an audience member, I almost felt like she was always looking over my shoulder. And don't worry, I'm not forgetting about Terrence Stamp as another mysterious character here in this movie. But since this is spoiler free, let's just say he's excellent. There's a quippy bit of line delivery he has. He plays this gentleman, ladies man type of character, but he's always got something going on, and I never knew what to expect, and I thought I had him pinned until I didn't. But man, Terrence Stamp just continues his excellent run, because I mean, I don't have to tell you how amazing he is, but he is amazing in this movie. Alrighty you guys, so let's get right into what I thought didn't work in Last Night in Soho, and trust me, it was tough to come up with some negatives for this movie. But there are things here that I didn't really care for too much, and it begins with that third act. I didn't think the structure there was very strong, and if anything, the movie started to fall apart just a little bit in certain moments. It was a bit too bloated, I thought, and overly stylized to where it actually distracted from the impact I think that part of the story could have conveyed. Just when I was getting into a certain element, there's a weird switch up into what we see, and maybe we're seeing things through the eyes of Thomasin McKenzie's character Eloise, and that's all good and well, but I do think that it ruins a certain flow and momentum that was being built in that scene. Maybe that grows over me over time. Maybe the third act is something that I come to love over multiple rewatches, but on first watch, I didn't think the third act worked as well as the other parts of the film. And for as great as our character development was for our leads and some of our supporting cast, I was a little disappointed to see how they handled Jocasta and John. Now, both of these characters, of course, have huge implications on Eloise's life. Let's start with Jocasta, who is played by Sanove Carlson. I thought she did a great job in this role. She's a mean girl, she's not supposed to be liked, and she's really the Jack equivalent to what Sandy deals with in the 60s. Now, of course, she's not a splitting image of what Jack has done with Sandy, but she is the antagonist to Eloise. And I thought she did a great job at being a mean girl in this movie. Her and her gang, which includes the wonderful Jessie May Lee, who plays Lara in this movie, does an amazing job, you guys. It's just they don't get enough love to where I think that when they pop up again in the second half of the movie, it's okay. And then there's Michael Ajao as John, Ellie's love interest. And even though I felt he gave a great performance, especially when he works alongside Thomasin McKenzie, who he's pretty much paired up with throughout the film, I don't necessarily feel the movie really focuses on kind of them and their relationship. I'm not saying relationship as like a loving relationship, but relationship together, whether it be friendly or even romantic. I really wanted them to be focused on a little bit more because there's a crucial moment in that third act that plays better if we kind of understand them better, and I didn't feel like we really felt that impact. And one thing I can touch on is this: once the story starts to unravel, I'm not a big fan of these ghosts they use in the movie. Now, it's okay to include that, but I just don't think the design worked for me, and if anything, it looked a little out of place even. And yes, I get it. They were going to go that route anyway. It seemed like we were kind of inching towards it, but I do really wish that maybe the design was a little bit better. For me, it just didn't really work. Maybe it's a little bit of a nitpick, but it just never wowed me. But overall, you guys, Last Night in Soho is a great experience and a wild ride. It played with a ton of my emotions as well, because in the first chunk of the film I thought this is kind of beautiful. I love following this journey with Eloise and seeing her grow. It almost has this coming of age vibe to it, but then as we get deeper into the movie, there's a lot that happens, and like I mentioned earlier, sensory overload, so I'm focusing on so many different things, but somehow Edgar Wright made it work. It features a pair of some of my favorite performances this year with Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy, and there's a lot of style here that just speaks to me. It really is my jam. The cinematography, I'm telling you again, is incredible. That stabbing sequence, the first one we get, is great. There are so many different shots here that I can go back and study and just fall in love with even more after I rewatch this film multiple times, because there's a lot that I didn't pick up on first watch, but I'll tell you, this is an incredibly rewatchable movie. And I just love that while at its core, yes, it is a scary movie, it doesn't always need to focus on that. Instead, it speaks a lot more to mental health. And the film is never over-explaining itself either. It sort of just allows the story to unravel naturally, which I loved. Edgar Wright has a movie that's under 2 hours where I felt like I could have lived in it for another 2 hours, and that's a good sign. There's just enough here to really immerse me into the world of Last Night in Soho, whether it be the costume design, the aesthetic, the soundtrack, and even the acting. This is just a recipe for success. And if we're being completely honest, this is one of my favorite movies of the year. It is just so strong. It's an amazing addition to Edgar Wright's filmography, and I do think that every actor involved, guys, just works so well. So if you're coming for incredible performances, you got it. If you want something that'll scare you a little bit, you got that too. And if you want a smart story, well, that's Last Night in Soho. So yes, I love this movie, and I highly recommend that you watch it this weekend. Alrighty, y'all, so there you have it. That's my real review of Last Night in Soho. Again, a movie that I recommend you see even on the big screen if you can, because the bigger the sound, the bigger the impact. And if you haven't already, y'all, and you want to see more reviews just like this, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed Last Night in Soho too. And if you did, and if you didn't, of course, you can let me know down below in the comments, guys. Let's have a conversation about this movie, because there's a lot to unpack here. And trust me, I'm not going to try to sing again. Yes, Anya Taylor-Joy does a great job singing in this movie, and I'm not going to ruin that experience for you. Alrighty, y'all, again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening. Okay, maybe I'll sing a little bit. Can I just... This is my water bottle, not even a microphone. Now I'm thirsty.